Ringo Starr really hated her more than anybody else. Born Richard Starkey on July 7, 1940, in the working-class district of Dingle, Liverpool, England, he rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most beloved figures in popular music. His early life was marked by hardship. His family struggled financially, and his childhood was plagued by serious health issues. Long times in hospitals because of illnesses such as peritonitis and tuberculosis kept him away from school and delayed his education. These trying experiences molded his spirit of resilience and appreciation for life. During those long times in the hospital, he developed a love for rhythm as he drummed on tables and bedpans, unknowingly forming a foundation for his future as one of the world's most iconic drummers. Before international stardom, Ringo did a range of jobs: apprentice joiner and machine operator in a Liverpool factory. But this love for music couldn't be kept down. Influenced by skiffle and early rock and roll, he started to play drums with local groups until he joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, one of Liverpool's leading groups at the time. His dynamic drumming style and cheerful personality made him stand out. By 1962, destiny called when the Beatles' original drummer, Pete Best, was dismissed and Ringo was invited to join John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. With Ringo on board, that lineup changed music history forever. As the drummer for the Beatles, Ringo Starr quickly developed a reputation for his solid, unshakable beat, his inventive fills, and his idiosyncratic sense of time. Though he generally remained in the background, his musical contribution was essential to the signature sound of the band. Songs like Ticket to Ride, Rain, and A Day in the Life are exemplary of his ability to subtly yet powerfully enhance melodies with rhythm. Beyond drumming, Ringo's warm personality and comedic charm made him a favorite among fans. He also took center stage as the singer for the Beatles on a number of occasions, with a little help from my friends Yellow Submarine and Octopus's Garden, are each characteristic of his affable, good-natured personality and childlike sense of wonder. When the Beatles broke up in 1970, Ringo would not be confined to the background. He launched his solo career in earnest to prove, above all, that he was much more than just a drummer in a famous band. His first solo albums, Sentimental Journey and Beaucoup of Blues in 1970, revealed a multifaceted artist who embraced such varied musical genres as pop, country, and jazz standards. His 1973 album, Ringo, became a surprise success, generating chart-topping hits such as Photograph and You're 16 that reached the top of the global charts. His friendly, relatable style resonated deeply with audiences, and collaborations with his former Beatles bandmates demonstrated the enduring bond they shared even after the band's breakup. Besides music, Ringo went on to have a long acting career in film, which included Caveman in 1981, That'll Be the Day in 1973, and The Magic Christian in 1969, starring alongside Peter Sellers. His instinctive comedic timing and down-to-earth nature made him an immediately likable screen presence, one that movie audiences enjoyed watching. As he matured, he became a narrator and voice actor for children's television, most notably voicing Thomas the Tank Engine in Friends, introducing an entirely new audience to his warm and engaging storytelling. Through the years, Ringo continued to tour and record with his all-star Band Aid traveling troupe of superstar musicians. His concerts became joyous celebrations of music, unity, and friendship as he blended Beatles classics with solo hits and those of his bandmates. His legacy as a drummer continued to grow, with literally countless artists citing him as an inspiration for his precision, musicality, and understated brilliance. In recognition of his contributions to music and culture, Ringo was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 2018, officially becoming Sir Richard Starkey, long overdue for a man who helped shape modern popular music. Ringo Starr's romantic life reflects both the turbulence of his years as a world-famous Beatle and the enduring strength of love he found later in life. His two marriages, first to Maureen Cox and later to Barbara Bach, represent very different chapters of his personal journey. His first marriage to Maureen Cox, a Liverpool-born hairdresser and devoted Beatles fan, began in the early 1960s at the height of Beatlemania. They met at the Cavern Club, the famous underground venue where the Beatles honed their craft. Maureen, just a teenager at the time, grew close to Ringo, seeing him as Richard Starkey, the man behind the drums, not just Ringo Starr, the international sensation. The couple married on February 11, 1965, amidst a media frenzy. Their wedding was an intimate affair, with close friends and family present, including fellow Beatles John Lennon and George Harrison. Maureen's loyalty and strength during those years were quite remarkable. While Ringo toured the world, she managed their home life, often shielding him and their children, Zach, Jason, and Lee, from an overwhelming spotlight. Zach later followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a respected drummer and performing with bands like The Who and Oasis. However, the dissolution of the Beatles in 1970 and the pressures of fame strained their marriage. Long separations, rock and roll temptations, and Ringo's struggles with alcohol contributed to growing distance between them. Their marriage ended in 1975, though they remained connected through their children and mutual respect. Maureen Cox died in 1994 of leukemia at just 48 years of age. Her death deeply shook Ringo, who was at her bedside during her final days. He later called her one of the most genuine and caring people he had ever met, a part of his life he'd always carry with him. Years later, through soul-searching and much personal transformation, Ringo found love once more with the actress-model Barbara Bach, best known as the Bond girl Anna Amasova in the 1977 James Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me. The two met in 1980 on the set of the adventure comedy film Caveman, which they were both appearing in. There was instant and undeniable chemistry between them. Later, Ringo recalled that he had found true love at first sight in Barbara, and she would bring calmness, elegance, and emotional stability into his life, compared to the roller coaster ride of his earlier years. Their relationship started well, and they were married on April 27, 1981, in a beautiful wedding at Marylebone Town Hall in London, the same place Paul McCartney had married Linda Eastman over a decade earlier. Friends, family, and musicians showed up to celebrate the wedding of two people who were finally finding their peace and company in each other. Barbara became a major influence in helping Ringo confront his struggles with addiction. In the late 1980s, both Ringo and Barbara checked themselves into rehab together. The decision would change their lives. Often, Ringo credits Barbara with saving him emotionally and physically, citing her support and love as integral to his path toward sobriety and stability. Through the decades, their marriage has remained one of the most enduring and admired in the entertainment industry. Despite pressures of fame, Ringo and Barbara have built a quiet, meaningful life together and split their time between homes in England, Monaco, and Los Angeles. They are known for their shared passion related to humanitarian causes, particularly related to environmental protection and addiction recovery programs. Barbara and Ringo also share a deep commitment to peace and love, which he often expresses through his art and music. Over the years, the Beatles have been considered the very meaning of musical brotherhood, for young men out of Liverpool who conquered the world together. But behind the fame and harmony that made their band so beloved by millions, tensions often bubbled beneath the surface, deeper than the public may have ever realized. To Ringo Starr, the quiet Beatle George Harrison had been someone he admired and respected, a man with whom he played as the band went on its path to immortality. But over time, personal slights, jealousy, and betrayal began to creep into the threads of their relationship. Eventually, Ringo would later admit to having more anger toward George than he had toward any other person in his life. "George was like a brother to me," Ringo once said. But sometimes brothers fight harder than enemies ever do. In that statement lay years of unspoken tension. Though Ringo was often seen as the peacekeeper of the Beatles, his calm exterior masked frustrations that had mounted during their years of stardom. Ringo had joined the group last, replacing the drummer Pete Best in 1962, and had quickly found himself in a whirlwind of fame. George, who had been with John Lennon and Paul McCartney since the beginning, more often than not treated Ringo as an outsider, not cruelly, but with the subtle superiority of one who'd been there first. George could be distant, Ringo remembered. He had his own world, his own spirituality, and sometimes he made me feel I didn't belong in it. Those moments of tension boiled over during the late Beatles period when personal egos and creative ambitions began pulling the group apart. George, anxious to be recognized for his songwriting, felt overshadowed by Lennon and McCartney. Ringo, meanwhile, struggled to find his place in a band where his musical contributions were often minimized. There were days, Ringo confessed, when he didn't even want to go to the studio. George and I would barely look at each other. I was tired of feeling invisible. The filming of Let It Be in 1969 captured the strain vividly. Silent glances, short tempers, and moments when Ringo simply walked out, unable to handle the tension. But what truly shattered Ringo's affection for George came later, when personal lives became entangled. Ringo's then-wife, Maureen Starkey, was the subject of a brief romantic involvement with George in the early 1970s. Though George was also married at the time to Pattie Boyd, the revelation hit Ringo like a thunderbolt. "I felt betrayed," he admitted years later. "It wasn't just about a woman. It was about trust. It was about someone I thought was family crossing a line you can't uncross." The affair became one of the most painful episodes in Ringo's life, causing deep resentment toward George that took years to fade. "I hated him for what he did," Ringo said bluntly. "I really did. It stayed with me for a long, long time." George, for his part, later acknowledged his mistake, though not always in the most apologetic way. When confronted, he reportedly told Ringo, "Well, you know, all things must pass." The remark, a reference to his own album title, infuriated Ringo, who felt it was a cold dismissal of the damage done. Friends close to the Beatles have said that Ringo avoided George for months after the affair came to light, and even when they did see each other again, their conversations were tense and shallow. "It wasn't like we could just pick up a drumstick and a guitar and make it all better," Ringo explained. That wound didn't heal with music. But over time, Ringo's deep spirituality and forgiving nature began to rise to the forefront. As the years went by, he contemplated what the meaning of friendship truly was and how utterly hopeless it was to hold onto anger. When George became terminally ill with cancer in the late 1990s, Ringo went to his bedside, having let go of all bitterness. "I told him I loved him," Ringo later remembered, his voice soft. "After everything that happened, I realized that love was stronger than hate. I didn't want to leave this world with that pain still between us." George smiled and clasped his hand, and for a moment, the years of tension melted away. When George Harrison died in 2001, Ringo was one of the first to publicly discuss his friend. He said tearfully, "George was my brother. I may have hated him once, but I never stopped loving him." That confession captured the complexity of their bond, from fierce emotions to human flaws, to the unbreakable tie forged through music and shared history. In the final analysis, Ringo's star story with George Harrison testifies that even among legends, love and resentment almost always overlap. There had been a friendship tested by fame, betrayal, and time behind every harmony sung and every drum beat played, yet it endured up to the last note.